Imagine coming back home from the army to surprise your little brother after months away, expecting smiles, laughter, maybe even tears of joy. But instead of celebration, you find silence. Instead of open arms, you find bruises. Bruises caused by a self-proclaimed HOA cop who turned his own home into a prison. That was the reality Marcus Tate walked into the day he returned to Brook Haven. He thought the battle ended overseas, but the real war was waiting on his doorstep. The gravel crunched under Marcus Tate's boots as he walked up the familiar driveway. The late afternoon sun stretched long shadows across the quiet cul-de-sac of Brook Haven. 14 months away, 14 months of desert heat, sandstorms, and nights staring at the stars, wondering if he'd ever come home again. But here he was, duffel slung over his shoulder, ready to surprise his little brother. He imagined Jamal bursting out the door like he used to, leaping into his arms. He pictured their mom, Lorraine, wiping her eyes, laughing as she pulled them both inside. But when he reached the porch, silence greeted him. Not laughter, not footsteps, just silence. Something felt wrong. The door creaked as he pushed it open. Unlocked. That was strange. His mother had been a fortress about locks. Inside, the air smelled of dust and stale air. A photo lay shattered on the floor. Glass cracked over the smiling faces of his mother and Jamal. His chest tightened. Jamal, Marcus's voice echoed down the hallway. He found him curled up on his bed, facing the wall. When he turned, Marcus's heart stopped. A dark bruise stretched across his cheek. A cut traced his lip. He flinched when Marcus reached for him. Jamal, Marcus's voice cracked, softer than it had been in years. His brother's head snapped toward him, eyes wide as if he were staring at a ghost. For a heartbeat, he didn't move, his breath caught in his throat, lips trembling. Then came the gasp, sharp and broken, before he stumbled off the bed and pressed himself against the wall like he couldn't believe Marcus was real. Marcus, his voice was a whisper, hoarse from silence. Marcus dropped his duffel on the floor and froze, his heart hammering. He hadn't prepared for this. Not his brother's hollow cheeks, not the bruise blooming purple and yellow across his skin. His little brother, the one who used to chase him barefoot across the yard, now looked at him like the world had swallowed him whole. "I'm here," Marcus said, stepping closer, hands raised as if approaching something fragile. "It's me, Jamal. I'm home." When he finally moved, it wasn't joy that carried him into Marcus's arms. It was desperation. He collapsed against him, clinging so tight Marcus's chest ached. And then the dam broke. Sobs tore out of Jamal, muffled against Marcus's uniform, each one shaking through his ribs like small explosions. Have you ever returned to the place you call home, expecting comfort, only to be met with pain you never imagined? What would you do if it was your own brother collapsing into your arms, not from joy, but from heartbreak? Before we go further, what city or country are you watching from right now? Drop it in the comments. We love seeing where our viewers are tuning in from. And if you believe no brother should ever have to suffer in silence like this, especially not at the hands of an HOA cop, make sure to like this video and subscribe to Story Arc because standing up for family is where true courage begins. Marcus held him, fighting to breathe himself. He wanted to ask what happened, who touched him, why he looked like this. But the words tangled in his throat. All he could do was press his cheek against Jamal's hair, his jaw trembling as rage and sorrow battled inside him. Minutes bled into each other before Jamal's crying slowed to sharp hiccups. Marcus guided him gently to the kitchen, sat him down, and pushed a cup of tea into his shaking hands. "Talk to me, Jamal," he murmured, crouched in front of him now, eyes searching his. "Please tell me who did this to you." Jamal's fingers rattled against the porcelain. His lips parted, but no words came. Only a tremor that traveled through his shoulders. Marcus reached out, steadying his hand with both of his. "Look at me. Whoever it was, they'll never touch you again. I swear it." Finally, Jamal lifted his gaze. Fear, exhaustion, and something else, relief, swam in his eyes, and with a broken breath he began to speak. Their mother, Lorraine, had died 3 months ago. Pneumonia. Marcus's commanding officer had tried to reach him, but war swallowed the message. After the funeral, Jamal was alone, and that's when he came. Derek Miles, the man who called himself the HOA cop of Brook Haven. Not a real officer, but a bully with a badge stitched onto his vest. He claimed he was there to make sure Jamal followed the rules. At first, he pretended to help, mowing the lawn, dropping off groceries. Then, he started controlling everything. Suddenly, every little thing was a violation. A dandelion poking through the grass. Fine. Music a little too loud when Jamal was studying. Violation. And the worst part, he started walking into the house uninvited. Inspection, he'd call it, as if a 17-year-old boy was supposed to believe he had the right to barge in whenever he pleased. Then came the shouting, the threats, the bruises. Marcus's fists clenched around his tea mug. The desert had hardened him. But this was different. This was his brother, and no self-appointed cop was going to break him. That night, Marcus didn't sleep. He sat at the kitchen table, jaw set, planning. The next morning, Derek Miles came stomping up the driveway like he owned it. That's how Marcus first saw him. Broad shoulders stuffed into a tactical vest with HOA cop stitched in bold letters across the chest. The man even wore mirrored sunglasses as if the cul-de-sac were a battlefield and he was the commander. He pounded on the door without knocking, twice. Open up. Inspection time. His voice carried like a drill sergeant, loud enough for half the street to hear. Marcus, who'd slipped out earlier under the excuse of a store run, had doubled back quietly, watching from the side yard. He wanted to see it for himself, how this man treated his little brother when no one else was around. Inside, Jamal's hands shook as he opened the door. He kept his head down. Derek didn't waste a second. Living room's still a mess, he barked, tossing his keys on the counter like it was his place. I told you weeds out front were unsightly. One more violation and you'll be reported. Reported to who? Jamal asked in the smallest voice. To me, Derek snapped, stepping closer, towering over him. And when he raised his hand like he might strike, like he'd done before, that's when the air shifted. Because suddenly there was Marcus. He didn't announce himself. He didn't yell. He just appeared behind Derek, calm as a shadow, his grip locking around the man's wrist midair. The sound of it stopping, skin against skin, bone meeting steel, was louder than any shout. Derek twisted, shocked. Who the hell are you? Marcus's eyes didn't blink. His voice came out low, steady, the kind of tone that didn't need to rise. I'm his brother. He leaned in just enough for Derek to feel the weight of every word. And you just made the biggest mistake of your life. The room froze. Jamal pressed against the counter, barely able to breathe. Here's the thing. Marcus didn't swing. He didn't need to. He wasn't just a soldier. He was a strategist. And right then, he had the one thing Derek didn't expect. Evidence. Because while Derek thought he held the power, the police were already on their way. For a moment, the kitchen was locked in silence. Derek's wrist trembled in Marcus's grip, but Marcus didn't flinch. He held him there, eyes steady, jaw clenched like steel. Jamal stood frozen by the counter, his breath shallow, waiting for whatever came next. Derek tried to puff himself up. You don't scare me. I run this neighborhood. He sneered, yanking his arm back. This is my jurisdiction. Marcus almost laughed, but it wasn't humor. It was disbelief, the kind that makes your chest tight. He leaned closer, voice low enough to chill the room. You're not a cop. You're a coward hiding behind a fake badge. And then, as if on cue, the faint wail of sirens curled through the air outside. Jamal's eyes flicked to the window. Derek's confidence cracked. For the first time, Derek looked over his shoulder. Marcus stepped back, giving him just enough space to stew in the sound. Hear that? That's real authority, not your backyard fantasy. When the knock came at the door, Derek turned pale. 2 officers stepped in, actual officers, not self-appointed bullies. Marcus had called them the night before. He'd stayed up till dawn, gathering everything. The bruises Jamal tried to hide, the shattered photo frames, even the hospital record he'd been too scared to show. And most importantly, he'd recorded Jamal's story, every word. The taller officer's eyes narrowed at Derek. "Sir, we've had multiple complaints about your behavior. We're here to ask a few questions." Derek tried to bluster his way through. "This is harassment. I'm acting under HOA code." "HOA code doesn't let you put your hands on a minor," the officer cut in sharply. "Step outside." And that was the moment. That was when all the swagger drained from him. He looked at Marcus, then at Jamal, then at the officers as if searching for anyone to back him up. But the street outside had gathered. Neighbors peeking from porches and windows. People who had seen his patrols, his shouting fits. For once, they weren't pretending not to notice. Derek raised his hands slowly, muttering curses under his breath, but the cuffs clicked all the same. Jamal clutched Marcus's arm, trembling. For the first time in months, he wasn't shaking from fear, but from the shock of freedom. And Marcus, he wasn't smiling. Not yet. He knew this wasn't over. Not until his brother felt safe again. That night, the house didn't feel haunted anymore. For months, Jamal had tiptoed through the rooms like a guest in his own home, afraid Derek might come pounding on the door or barging in without warning. But now the silence was different. It wasn't fear. It was peace. Marcus sat across from Jamal at the kitchen table, the same table where he'd once done his high school homework while Jamal scribbled with crayons. Only now the crayons were gone, replaced by stacks of police forms and legal paperwork. "Listen," he said gently, sliding the papers toward him. "The officers need a statement. I know it's hard, Jamal, but your words, they matter. They'll make sure he never comes back." Jamal's hands trembled as he picked up the pen. He glanced at Marcus, tears swelling. "What if nobody believes me?" Marcus reached across, steadying his hand. "They will, because I do, and I'm not going anywhere this time." It took hours, but Jamal finally signed his name. His story now locked on paper. Marcus had already spoken to an old army buddy, Jason Cole, who worked as a lawyer. By morning, guardianship papers would be filed. For the first time since their mom, Lorraine, passed, Jamal wouldn't have to face the world alone. But Marcus wasn't just thinking about signatures and forms. He was thinking about the house itself, the broken frames, the cracks in the walls, the paint that had peeled while Jamal was too afraid to open a window. He wasn't going to let the house be a reminder of pain. It needed to become a sanctuary again. The next day, Marcus rolled up his sleeves. He fixed the porch step that had squeaked for years, painted Jamal's room his favorite shade of deep blue, and even dragged his old guitar out of the garage, dusting it off until the strings gleamed. At first, Jamal sat quietly on the couch, watching, but slowly something changed. He started to hum while Marcus painted. He laughed, actually laughed, when Marcus spilled a bucket of water all over his boots. And when Jamal finally strummed the guitar strings, the sound that filled the room wasn't perfect, but it was alive. The bruises on his skin would fade, Marcus knew. But healing his spirit, that was going to take time, and he was ready to give him every second. Slowly, the house that had once felt like a cage started buzzing with life again. Neighbors dropped off casseroles. Volunteers helped Marcus repaint the fence, and kids from school began stopping by, not out of pity, but out of friendship. One evening, Marcus sat on the porch, watching Jamal laugh with a friend as they shared a bowl of ice cream. He leaned back, arms crossed, the tension in his shoulders finally easing. For months, Jamal had carried the weight of fear. Now he carried something else. Hope. And Marcus, he didn't see himself as a hero. He told anyone who asked, "I just did what any brother would do." But the truth was bigger. He'd given Jamal back his life. And in the process, reminded Brook Haven what community really meant. If this story moved you, let us know in the comments what parts struck you the hardest. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to SD Human Stories, because every time we share these stories, we remind the world that courage begins at home.